Hello and welcome once again to the Dan John podcast. This is episode 35 and I'm so happy you're here. During this time of the quarantine, this shelter in place, I've been noticing a big surge in interest in the 10,000 swing challenge. Yesterday I commented on it and someone basically told me, you're a little late to the party. And then I thought, maybe this person doesn't know, but I'm the person who came up with it. A couple years ago, my friends over at Testosterone Nation, tnation.com, we had a group phone call. And one of the things I was asked is to come up with a good way to use kettlebells and do basic bodybuilding, basic calisthenics, basic strength training moves. And one of the suggestions was to come up with a big number, and the number that they came up with was 10,000 swings, which was a lot of swings. So my good friend and I, Mike Warren Brown, went just below here to my little gym, the Murray Institute for Lifelong Fitness, or the MILF as we always call it, and we started figuring out how to do this. Our first idea was not a great one. We decided to do 1,000 swings a day for 10 days. On day 2, we got to 800 swings, and I said, Mike, we need to stop. And he goes, why? And I said, because my entire body is freezing up. The volume of 1,000 swings followed by 800 swings with the 24 kilo kettlebell just seemed to freeze me up. So the next day we decided we'll just ease up and just do 500 swings a day. And so Mike and I ultimately did 40,000 swings to figure out the best ways to do it. Now, there's a number of ways to do it. If you read the original article, I tell you to do 10, followed by strength movement, push-up, goblet squat, pull-up, followed by 15, strength movement, 25, strength movement, 50, extended rest. The problem for a lot of people, of course, was that 50. Many people couldn't hold on to it long enough, and many people just don't have the technique to do that many reps. But that was the best system we had used at that time. Later, Mike and I realized that, doing groups of 15 and 35 swings and mixing after every set of 15 a strength movement, after every set of 35 mobility or flexibility movement actually worked a lot better. Having said that, many people can't do 35 swings. So the third method, and this is the method my daughter's using, she's Lindsay Robinson on Instagram, and this is the method I think might be best for most people, especially people who are a little tenuous as they get to the higher rep swings. For example, on your first set, you get to 13. The technique breaks, or you just don't feel the snap. Bell goes down, you rest. You start then on 14 and you go up to 25, and then from 26 to 37, from 38 to 52, and you just build up to the 500 daily swings. I have found that actually to be the most enjoyable way of doing it. Between sets, you can still do a strength movement or mobility movement, or simply rest and get the 500 swings. I'm really happy that people are taking on this task. It's the load for men should probably be the 24, and they're two-handed swings for this particular challenge. I'm always interested in how people who have never done it have great insights that it should be heavier. Trust me, do the 10,000 swing challenge with the 24, gentlemen, then get back to me. With ladies, the 12 or the 16 is fine, and I've had many women use the 24, but generally get through the first go-round first before you make it better. Well, there's a bit of advice right there for life. Do it, then make it better. I'm kind of proud about this. During this time of kind of crisis, exercise is a good antidote for wanting to kill your family, wanting to kill your kids, wanting to kill your spouse, wanting to kill your neighbor, wanting to kill the television set. For me, I'm watching the news sometimes, and I need to go work out. I need to work out that weird stress you get from watching television when all it is pretty much dangerous and scary news. I wish my mom and dad were here, honestly, because I'm very proud of this. Our family motto is make a difference. And I feel that with the 10,000 swing challenge, I have truly made a difference in many people's lives. I've had a lot of questions lately about resources. I think a lot of people being homebound so much now are starting to read more, which is great. And I'm getting a lot of questions about what should I read in the world of strength and conditioning. So I put together a video for you about resources. Now, the first part is where I got most of my education in strength and conditioning from my mentors. And I talk about Dick Nottmeyer, I talk about Ralph Mott, I talk about many others, and about how they shaped my career by, almost in some ways, almost magically showing up when I needed an intervention. Rick Bojak's famous point when he touched me on the chest and said, "You can't get bored." That was a time in my life I needed to hear somebody tell me that the job as a coach is to watch the same thing over and over again. The second part of it are books that I recommend, and I also offer a few websites. Some of the books now are not in print anymore, and they're hard to get, but that doesn't mean you're going to lose anything. I basically explain why I think the books are so important to me. It's interesting. At the end, I'll give you a little list of why I think these books are so important. And one of my rules is that I've read, reread, and reread every one of them. And another rule is I have regretted loaning those books out because I've never gotten them back. So I hope this is helpful. It's going to be a fairly long presentation, but there's a lot of stories and there's a lot of information, and I hope you get something from it. Questions this week for the podcast. Well, we have a question from Mike. We get a lot of questions from Mike's on this podcast. First, I was wondering what you like to do for recovery and flexibility. But let's talk first, Mike, about recovery. I just finished about a 1-hour lecture on recovery. And it's funny because the entire lecture can probably just be really one slide. Number one, Mike, it's sleep. Sleep is your number one recovery tool. But I'm starting to realize that the number two recovery tool is what my wife and daughters say, FOMO. FOMO. Fear of missing out. I know it's funny to say this, but when you find out that Tom Brady sleeps in magic underwear and he has a temperature-controlled thing, and this online biohacker has a magic thing he puts under his bed that grounds you, it provides the vibrations of the earth, and then you need a special pillow that talks to your chakras across your meridians, and it hyperdrives your cross. And that, the other internet guy, every day he goes out into his backyard, he has a $35,000 ice pond that he put in, and then after 57 seconds in the ice pond, he does 4 breaths and then leaps up into a sauna for an hour, and then fear of missing out. Sleep is the best thing you can do. Proper nutrition, hydration, drink water. Sure, I have a sauna in my house. I used to have a hot tub until it blew up. Water and electricity are a dangerous mix. I've got foam rollers. I've got the vibrating neck foam roller, and I've done all the stuff. But really, it comes down quality sleep. During the time of this coronavirus, I have been extending my meditation period. I always meditate at least 1 minute a day. My meditations have become longer. Now, my wife and daughters often say that my meditation looks a lot like napping to them. But sometimes I meditate and sometimes I meditate and fall asleep. If you meditate and fall asleep, that's often a sign that you need more sleep. So if I could just summarize it very, very simply for you, Mike, quality sleep, good investments in a good bed, blackout curtains, getting all the little lights out of your bedroom, turning off your phone, turning off the internet, turning off everything, and getting quality sleep. That's number one. After that, obviously, you got to get your fats, you got to get your proteins, you got to get your water. Absolutely. but it's sleep. And if you need to learn the skill of napping, you need to learn the skill of meditation. I use brain.fm for my purposes, but I also use the 1 moment meditation. It's a free app that I think is fabulous to practice meditating. Now, on number 2, you have flexibility. We don't do a lot of pure flexibility work anymore. We're much more into mobility and Tim Anderson's original strength. Now, on my YouTube, I have a lot of stuff about original strength, but honestly, you might as well just go to the master. I want you to look up Tim Anderson, original strength. His videos and his books and his products are amazing. It's been a game changer for me. I met him. He was my partner at the functional movement screen kettlebell workshop for 4 days. And I find him to be as smart and as honest and as kind as anybody I've ever met in my life. And that's important stuff for me. Mike has a second question. This is the Mike show today. Healthy food, snacks, and tips to put on some lean mass. Well, snack on tuna fish if you can. Snack on hard-boiled eggs. If you buy my book, Mass Made Simple, I'm going to recommend peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Now, reminder, that's a 6-week thing, and it's all about putting on mass. But most of the time, and you made it really difficult for me because you said healthy food, snacks. But I have a book called Mass Made Simple, and I have a whole section on all these tips. One is that if you want to build mass, and this is something Dick Nottmeyer told me, you should always be walking around in a sweatshirt or a sweater. Stay warm, conserve. In the powerlifting world, they say, don't stand if you can sit, don't walk if you can stand, and don't run if you can walk. The idea is, you're trying to conserve every ounce of energy you can. But then you threw the word healthy in there. Now, getting huge isn't always necessarily a good thing for your health. But so Mass Made, I feel like I'm selling my books, and I am in a sense, but Mass Made Simple is the best advice I can give you. I know. My good friend Dave Draper talks about doing the tuna fish and water diet for a few weeks. And if you can do that, you're a better man than I. And good luck to you. We have a question from Monica. I'm a 58-year-old female and mediocre powerlifter. A number of smart, observant people have told me that I could lift more if I engage my lats. The problem is I have no idea how to use my lats. Even in exercises like lat pull-downs, lat raises, and pull-ups, etc., I sidestep my lats by using my traps, rhomboids, delts, etc. Do you have any advice or know of any exercises or drills to help me find, isolate, and engage my lats? I don't know if this is relevant, but I have a very narrow but deep rib cage. That could be certainly a factor. But I think the movements you're using are the issue. If you're truly not using your lats, which I don't think is physically possible, but this is what your coaches and observers are saying, you really need to go to planks and moving planks, okay? That's why I'm such a big believer in the loaded carry family, is because they are a moving plank. So if you're doing something as simple as a suitcase carry, okay? So that's a single arm farmer walk, okay? One arm loaded, the other hand free. As you walk, you'll be able to actively pin your shoulder to your rib cage by pulling your lats on. I'm wondering if it's just something you need to practice with simpler movements. So I'm thinking suitcase carries. The interesting thing is on the push-up position plank, that plank, one of the things I always school people is to squeeze the lats. A very simple thing you could do. Now, it doesn't work with everybody, but you put something like a pencil, a piece of paper, a book inside the armpits while you do that, and you squeeze them down and you hold it there. That might be a way. But Monica, your lats are working. It'd be interesting for me to see exactly what they're seeing. But if it is true, you're not going to be able to do it during active things, active complex movements. I would suggest push-up position planks, suitcase carries, farmer walks, There is a version of a banded, you'll take a band, hook it up to a pull-up ring, and just pull it down like this. That might help too. This is a unique problem. And get back to me on what you think works. Thank you. We have a question from Anthony. First, let me start by saying I'm not looking for medical advice. Thank you, Anthony. It's very important. I'm going to be 62 relatively soon. You're a mere child. And an effort to do some sort of workout exercise at least 6 days a week. I'm there with you. I have diagnosed hip bursitis for going on 3 to 4 years now, and it's getting progressively worse. I would like to hear all about your experiences with hip replacement, from the symptoms, treatments, decision to get one, how you chose your doctor, the operation itself, as the recovery and rehab. That's a lot of questions. I have just recently subscribed to your workout programs I'm looking forward to using with the somewhat limited equipment I have at home to continue to stay in good shape. Thank you. Well, first thing, and Anthony, I can only tell you that I was born with a condition called pistol grip hips. And according to my doctor, the day I was born, basically I was destined for a double hip replacements, total hip replacements. So I noticed my hips clicking when I was in high school, just doing little things like hitting a sled in football. You know, I'd get up and I'd hear a little sound. Well, what I didn't know was that even in high school, it's already starting to move on to bone on bone. The symptoms for me start off with simply clicking noises, kind of an issue with hamstring pulls, certain parts of my career. It's interesting because of when you're in pain, it probably changed my sprinting gait a little bit and probably made me pull hamstrings more often. Those were the things I noticed, the clicking sound and the hamstring issues. My hamstrings were so tight all the time. They're not that way anymore since the hip replacements. There were no treatments that helped. My friend Matt Spiller gave me some things that distracted the pain, and that was very helpful. But basically, I just got to the point that I was in so much pain, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that I was basically blind in pain, and I got the first one done. The first total hip replacement I got, my doctor was very good. We had really very few issues, a couple of things here and there with, getting around, but nothing bad. The second one, my doctor, Dr. Gibbs, I'm very lucky because if you know the Olympic Games, there was a speed skater by the name of Eric Hayden who got 5 gold medals in 1 Olympics. I go to the Hayden Orthopedic Clinic, so when I go to get my hips done, I'm in a room full of, there's athletes in there, there's hockey players, there's people. It's not just a geriatric ward. I mean, there's people who hurt their hips for a variety of reasons. So Dr. Gibbs is interesting, by the way, one small thing. I held him as a baby, which is kind of an interesting thing. So Dr. Gibbs has worked with a lot of NHL teams, and he's very good, very smart, very caring young man. And that's how I chose my doctor. And in the rehab and recovery, I've discussed many places, many times. On this last one, basically, I was in bed for a few days. I moved around okay. There were a few issues getting up and down, but I don't really remember them because, you're on fairly heavy painkillers. But I weaned myself of painkillers after day 2, and I was pretty mobile almost immediately. I was training within weeks, I think 2 weeks. And the best advice I can give a total hip replacement, if you can do it, is push the prowler. It is an amazing rehab. I'd love to say just walk up hills, but that's just not true. But prowler pushes is exactly what the THR patient needs. It works the glute really well, and it brings you back to locomotion, which is what you want to do. I hope that helps. I hope the best for you, because I know how much pain you can be in. Thank you. We have a question from Aaron. My question to you now is, can you recommend any particular resources that are critical to better assess athletes? Well, I have a book called Can You Go? That's how I assess athletes, Aaron. Anonymous, I'm sorry. Um, yeah, that's how I assess athletes. If an athlete's injured but can play, we play him. I mean, I'm sure there's some people going, "Oh my God," out there, but that's the reality of sports. Um, I think back to my senior year at Utah State. I pulled a hamstring, and that following Saturday I competed. I went down to this place in Provo, and I beat them in the discus big time with a blown hamstring. You could see at the behind my knee, there was all that, there was black and blue behind my knee because all the blood was pooling down, and it hurt really bad, but I won. You follow up this with this. Of course, I highly value orthopedic and special tests as a physical therapist, but are there any tools you found to be valuable in your career, especially those that may provide objective measures? Anonymous, I have a book called Can You Go? And I go through what I call the 1, 2, 3, 4 assessment program. It's very simple. It's very straight to the point, but I'm just never sure of the value of assessment with athletes. I'm on the phone daily with professional teams and the military, and we talk about this all the time. The strength coaches will say to me, "We have all this information." Okay, and what does it tell you? Well, like in baseball, you have a ton of information, and either the person can hit the ball or they can't hit the ball. Either they can throw the ball fast or they can't throw the ball fast. When you ask about sports in the future, you're going to be a lot more specific and a lot clearer about what you want from me. Yes, there's tests, absolutely, and I have great belief in them. But the bottom line is, can the person perform or not? And that is a tough lesson to learn. Linus emails me. In several of your latest podcasts, you have discussed the issue of trying to chase multiple rabbits at the same time. My question is, if you employ this strategy, focusing on one quality at a time, to athletes of all ages, or if you treat people at different stages in their athletic career differently. Yes, that is exactly what you do. But Linus, make sure you understand what we're talking about. If I've got a discus thrower, the rabbit he or she is chasing is to throw the discus farther. But they also need to be very strong. They need all these other qualities too. Powerful. They need an interesting kind of work capacity. So what you try to do is build it into the annual program, and then if you're lucky enough to have them for multiple years, then you can focus in off seasons on those gaps that they need to fill in. It is a very it can be elegant in some ways. The mistake I think you're hearing, Linus, is always remember when you're talking to me, active athletes, everybody else. With active athletes, I'm trying to get them to their goal. With everybody else, we're trying to get them to address their needs. Not what they want, but what they need. Body composition, mobility, strength. The mistake everybody else's tend to make is that they try to, well, they start to go off in all these different directions. And so what you really need to do within everybody else, if they're a body composition client, you got to deal with caloric restriction somehow and get them to do inefficient exercises. If they're a mobility client, they need to do mobility work and some form of hypertrophy work. So the two of them will work together. If they're a strength client, many women I work with who want to lose some body fat, the problem they have they're not strong enough yet. So we need to get them stronger first, okay? So it's not a question of chasing rabbits with the active athlete. It's trying to get the body composition client to realize that all they want to do is sweat. All they want to do is feel the burn. But then after that workout, they go in and eat they'd eat a couple bagels. Here in Salt Lake, one of my students worked at a bagel shop, and they had this one particular bagel, and it was just disgusting, really. And I said, "How many calories in that?" She goes, "We're not allowed to tell you." What? It had 1,100 calories. I think you can run a marathon on 1,100 calories. And that was one bagel. Folks, you're not going to outrun that bagel. You're not going to outrun that dessert you had last night. You certainly can have bagels and you can have desserts, but you're going to have to really clean up the rest of the stuff. So make sure you keep that straight in your head, Linus, for me. Active athletes, we are going to do whatever we need to do to get them to their goal. So that does mean lots of strength work in the off season. It does mean mobility work, flexibility work as appropriate, and then the bulk of their time on their sport. But for everybody else, we're going to focus on what they need to do now. We have a question from Todd. Todd writes, "You've mentioned several times that for folks approaching 6 feet and beyond, you tend to have them pull deadlifts from a higher starting position than the standard bar height. I'm sure the answer will fall somewhere in the realm of it depends, but what do you consider appropriate bar placement for the start of the deadlift pull?" Speaking here of a mid-50s guy training to maintain a very active lifestyle and stave off the retirement home. Well, that's great. Now, there's nothing wrong with pulling weights from the floor. You got to make sure you're clear on that. But when I'm working with athletes especially, what we need to do is we need to get them as the fastest route we can to their goals. So if we're having them hunched over doing deadlifts and they're going, "Oh, that really hurts that's when I started picking up on this. So basically, Todd, I have two spots I use for athletes. One is about an inch or two below the knee. Now, really, it's around where the patella tendon is. And then it's an inch or two above the knee. And really, it's basically where the weight would touch the vastus. But those two positions allows the athlete to line up in a hinge. Okay, here's the direction of the deadlift. Here's the athlete's upper body and legs. So my concern about the deadlift, Todd, is that from the floor, is that what happens is they're at a perfect hinge, but as the bar lowers, they tend to start turning into a comma. And that's really, round back work has its place. Deadlifts on the floor have their place. But when I'm working with an athlete that we're trying to get up to the next level, we want to find the fastest route there. Interesting, a lot of the information that I'm sharing with you comes from my work with my German friends. I have been just blessed by having a lot of friends in Germany, Gernot, for example, who've turned me on to a lot of resources that allowed me to look at what these great, especially East German athletes were doing back in the day. And what they discovered is that they would build off the model of the athletes in front of them. And this is when I got this information, is that for most athletes, you just don't need to use the floor as a starting point. And boy, athletes who've been around a while will say, thank you, thank you, thank you, because it just seems to eliminate so much pain for them. So thank you, Todd. That's a good question. We have a feedback from Cory. Cory, thank you so much. This makes a difference. I want to report back on this. I purchased Dr. Kirch's book on shoulder pain and hanging. I'm happy to report that I've noticed more mobility, less stiffness, and less irritation from overhead pressing. I've done strict kneeling presses and TRX push-ups within the park bench workouts for the last several weeks. I'm not going to be doing dumbbell snatches or dips, as those seem to cause irritation no matter what. I'm just stopping here, but Cory, dips are one of those exercises where, honestly, do them one workout. If you don't feel anything painful, you got it for the rest of your life. If it hurts you, you're probably going to have issues with it. My young athletes always get that kills my sternum, coach. My older athletes say, I feel like I'm grinding, muscle or cartilage in there. So yeah, on the dip was one of the few times I'll say in my career, either or. They just don't work for some people. But but I'm able to do pretty much anything else, which is fine as a father of three, just trying to keep in between those healthy lines. Ironically, my doctor reminded that he had mentioned hanging to me in the past, and I had simply forgotten. He says, "Thank you for the suggestion and keep up the good work." But if I just want to comment on that one thing. Cory, that's the reason I keep journals and diaries, is I'll go back and I'll read something 10, 15, 20 years ago and go, why did I stop doing this? Why did I forget that? I love the idea that your doctor suggested this and you said, okay. Great stuff, Cory. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it more than you know. Okay, so we have a question from Phillip. Phillip means lover of horses. My question is this. I've been a personal trainer for 6 years now. I am 44 years old. I believe that I'm online training may be the future of personal training to come in the next couple of years. So I think it's been around a lot longer than you know, Phillip. We'll get to that. I am not online training, but I am trying to become one. I believe that the pandemic of this coronavirus is going to change the way we live for the future, especially for personal trainers and gyms. What is your opinion on this? Yeah, that's exactly right. So I actually had my first experience with postal training back in 1980 when I was getting ready for a weightlifting meet. Interesting, in the middle of that preparation is when my mother died. But I was up in Logan, Utah, and my coach, Dick Nottmeyer, was in Pacifica, at the Pacifica Barbell Club. And I would write him a letter and then put it in the mail. He'd get the information on my workouts. He would then mail me a letter, and we would talk. And that was postal training. And I've actually heard a lot of people do that. When I was young, we'd write letters to coaches and say, I don't understand this, and you get letters back. And in one case, I got a scholarship out of it. So that worked out nicely. So postal training and online training has been around a long time. One of my goals when I first started my first, I don't even, it was a website, and I'm not even sure it wasn't a blog. It was the original website was in 1998, 1999. I'm probably one of the first people in the fitness industry who wasn't a high intensity trainer, and they called themselves HIT Jedis. I was one of the first people to offer an opposing view to that online. So one of the things I discovered back in 98, and it's still true today, is there's some issues with online training. If you don't mind, Phillip, may go through them with you. One other thing. Also at about the same time, I became Columbia College's online instructor for religious studies. And they were, Arlen, who was my boss, already was way ahead of the rest of us about online education. So let me just kind of go through a couple things online that I want you to think about. First, and this is the toughest thing to get used to, if you work online, it's asynchronic. There is no time online. So I know people are saying like, I'm getting emails from people, hey, follow me in my workout. Hey, we're going to have a workout at 4 o'clock. Well, what does 4 o'clock mean to the people listening right now on this podcast? 4 o'clock at my house, your 4 o'clock might be 3 in the morning for me. 4 o'clock in Afghanistan versus Korea, that's a lot of 4 o'clocks. There's a lot of time zones on this planet. And you know that, and everyone hears that and they know it, but the truth is, and this is a hard thing to get used to, is that so your online platform has to be open and working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's why at Dan John University, one of the things I liked so much is that here's the workout. If you don't know any exercise, of course, but you look at the workout, you go, I know how to walk. I know how to do that. I know, oh, what's that? You click on it, 20-second video shows you what to do. And you're, oh, okay, I know, I've done that before. I know what to do. The mistake, okay, so anytime you want to work out using our platform, you can. Brian lives in Turkey. I live here in Utah. And we can do basically the same workouts, completely different time. So asynchronic is by far the biggest issue you're going to face. Number two, Again, the Dan John University idea, where we ask what equipment you have, how many days a week do you want to work out, how many minutes do you want to work out, how intense do you want it, how does it stay the same or go up. Those questions are the online education experience. I'm it's been tough to watch my friends in the fitness industry show people workouts, and the second I see them going from one piece of equipment to another, I think to myself, well, if their audience doesn't have both pieces of equipment, they can't follow. So you need to be as clear as you can right up front. Number two is the equipment of the people you're working with, their dedication time-wise, length of workout. Do they want to make it harder and harder and harder, or keep it consistent? Just some basic general questions. And number three is this idea that you can do this follow me workouts. I should say never works. Certainly it works. I mean, I can remember the VHSs with Jane Fonda, and I was at a school where the women would put that VHS tape, and they would all do the Jane Fonda workout, the fire hydrants and all the kicks and stuff. I don't know if it worked, but they were able to follow along pretty well. And I think that's the secret of a good VHS tape or DVD workout, is when you see it 20, 30, 40 times, you know what's coming next. I've done some kettlebell follow along workouts on DVDs, and they make sense. But let me show you the problems happening right now on the internet. Strength trainer, I'm watching this strength trainer the other day say, okay, we're going to snatch the weight. Now go half kneeling and press it once, stand back up. We're going to do a swing. We're going to do a clean. Switch hands, we'll do it. The bulk of your audience is like, where's this going? You can't follow along like that. If you watch the old Jack LaLanne videos on YouTube, and by the way, that's probably a better resource than most of the crap you're finding. He used to have the people do what he would call the circulatory work during the commercial breaks. So he'd go, hup, two, hup. During the commercial, keep doing your jumping jacks, keep doing your marching in place, whatever. Other than that, you're going to have a hard time having people follow along at your rate, at your pace. A few years ago, I saw something I thought was really a good idea. It was an aerobics thing, but I always thought we could take it into another place where they would have. So the person in the middle was high intensity. The person, as you looked, the person here was high intensity. This person here was extremely low, and this person here was moderate. So that would be an interesting thing you could do if you're thinking about this, where maybe you have, we're using a kettlebell example here, but we can do something else. This person here is doing kettlebell snatches. This person here is doing two-handed swings. And this other person here is doing either glute bridges or hip thrusts without load. I mean, that'd be a really kind of a fun way to do that. For follow along, the best format I know is the 30-30 for 30 workouts. If you Google my name, 30/30 for 30, I have a series of 5 articles on that on Target Publishing. Very proud of that. Again, hats off to my friend Gernot. This is a good question. I think I gave you a lot of good advice. If you take that good advice, I think you can make it work. Online education, let me just follow up with this. The preparation of online education is massive. And then you press a button and you don't have to do anything again. With teaching religious studies online, the work I did to prep this course was intensive, and I'll be honest with you, a little bit exhausting and exasperating. But once that class starts, then really all I become is this person who floats in and floats out and goes, that's a good point. That's a fine point. Your work has been excellent, Phillip. It's very simple. So that's going to be the hard part for a lot of people now. If you're trying to build a platform now, you got some work ahead of you. So just keep all those points in mind. Thank you. We have a question from Robin. Do you have a favorite exercise or one that you simply enjoy performing the movement? That, yes, and it's funny. as I think back to when I was in about the 9th or 10th grade, I thought at this age I would only be doing 2 exercises. The incline bench press, because at the time I thought that was the answer to all questions, because one of my heroes thought that incline bench press was important. It's funny how you think that. And the squat snatch. I love the movement of the Olympic snatch, the Olympic squat snatch. I only do it 2 days a week now, Monday and Fridays. But I love the movement. It's beautiful. It's fast. It's explosive. Yeah, it always seems to me that it could get better. I mean, I don't know how many of those lifts I've done in my life, but I always feel like, yeah, I could just, and that's what I like. It's like the discus throw to me. It's like there's always like, once I think I understand it, then I'll talk to someone and go, holy cow, how did I miss that? And then the brain starts again. So that would be mine. It's the squat snatch. And by the way, I'd like to tip my hat, Bob Fosse style, to little Danny John in the 9th grade for thinking those 2 exercises. That's what I'd be doing at this age. Now I do mostly double kettlebell overhead presses, mostly because I don't have an incline. But he was right. That's pretty good. So we have a question from James. What are your thoughts on single leg training for athletes? Well, James, that's going to be one of those things where I really need to be with the sports coach herself, to go over this. Generally, I'm still a believer, and I've always believed this. This comes from Dave Davis's work, 1974, that the best way to train almost every athlete is the Olympic lifts will include the clean and press, the snatch, the clean and jerk, the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. You can pull out any of those you want, or you can certainly add more. But for me, what I'm trying to build with an athlete in the weight room is I'm trying to get that athlete as strong as I possibly can get that athlete. I mean, and sometimes it's just, you got to get those numbers up. Of course, once the numbers get to the standard they need to be at, then for the rest of the career, it's much easier to get back to that standard, and you don't have to work nearly as hard. Before I even talk about single leg training, I always talk about loaded carries, hill sprints, stadium runs, and those kinds of things. I'm okay if you disagree with me. I'm okay if you think that lunges are important and single leg movements. The only problem I've always had, and I remember when the original single leg step up became a big deal. This guy from Eastern Europe came over and he said that the Soviets aren't doing any squat anymore. None of it's true. In fact, I've talked to the hammer thrower he referenced in the hammer thrower. I never did one in my life. Once we started doing those high box step ups, nearly within days, we were either had patella tendonitis with the athletes and myself, or my knees are killing me. With lunges, my knees are killing me. Now, Pavel once said, if you can lunge, you don't need to lunge. And if you can't lunge, you should never lunge. I always like that advice. It's interesting because a lot of Pavel's most rabid fans are shocked when I tell them that story. Like, wait. And it's just funny to watch their faces because the lunge is just, it's one of those exercises that it helps some and hurts others. I have a number of textbooks. I got a really good one right back there from the Germans where they're doing a whole bunch of single-legged Olympic lifts with step-ups. Now, I look at that and it's like, whew, that's a combination that could go right or wrong really quickly. So this is a tough one, James. It's one of those things, James, where it has to be done well. Single leg work has to be done well. A good friend of mine who was a big name in the fitness industry a while ago, he's done because he was screwing around showing off a single leg deadlift. One little tweak and that was it for him. It has to be done well. You have to prove to me that it's going to make you better. If you're a 50-foot shot putter and you're calling me up on the phone and saying, Dan, you're wrong. It's all Bulgarian split squats. I'll remind you that you're a mere 25 feet from being a good thrower. In other words, you got a ways to go. I don't like answering this question because no matter what I say, people take it personally. People question me. It's funny because I don't like the exercises, the single leg exercise very much. I see the value. We utilize some of the tools there, but I just don't put it into that top end for athletes. Thank you. Our friend Calvin asks a question. What are your favorite nonfiction books? Well, that's tough. The problem with reading, I read so much in our field, Calvin. So for me, I mean, I'll look over here and I see Dr. Sheehan's book on fitness. Love the book. I think it's a fun read. Underneath it's Maffei Tones in Fitness and Health. Over there, there's Guilford's Spring Chicken, The Book of Key, Cerruti's book, Ageless Athletes, Death by Food Pyramid, The Mustache Workout. Quantum Fitness by Dardick. So I love those books, and I'll reread them all the time. I like Pat Flynn's book on generalism a lot. I'm a huge fan of B.J. Fogg's book on tiny habits. I thought that was brilliant. I really did like Berardi's new book called Game Changer, though I don't, a lot of it, I'm to the point where my career is where it's at. So I hate to say it doesn't apply to me, but it's like a lot of the advice was like, I know that. I am a fan of travelogues. I wish I still had this book, but it was called Motoring with Muhammad, about a guy going down to Yemen and looking for a suitcase that he buried or something like that. I think it was a suitcase. I do like good travelogues. I have a great little book on tasting whiskey given to me by Mike Warren Brown, which I liked a lot. I read a lot. Much of my reading in nonfiction now, sadly, is mostly articles. Because of my time I spent on the internet, I tend to read more and more and more articles, more than I used to. But the one nice thing about some of the places I visit every day, there's two places I go every day. Openculture.com, which I just love. And the other one is Literary Hub. And then I go to Crime Reads on that. So Literary Hub, and then I go to Crime, after I read that, I go to Crime Reads. And one of the things that's been nice about that, it will remind me of some books that I've loved before. Both of them will do that. Sometimes books of philosophy, obviously, Shakespeare, things like that. The nice thing about Crime Reads is it reminded me not long ago about the Brother Cadfael series of books by Elias Peters, that I just loved. When I was going out to visit when I was in England, I was being driven up to a place that I'm not supposed to talk about, and it's right on the Welsh border. And we passed a town called Shrewsbury. And I said to the guy, Shrewsbury? He goes, yeah, how do you know Shrewsbury? That's where Brother Cadfael lives. And he gave me that look that most people give you when you realize that, you're a bit of a psychopath. So it's all good. Calvin, very good question. And if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind you give me some feedback on that, maybe some of your ideas, and we'll talk more about that in the future, okay? Hey, thanks so much, okay? And thanks for listening. It's an absolute pleasure to do this for you. And remember, if you have questions, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com, and I'll be there on the other side for you.